Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Good Morning Cambridge, a conversation with the best Waterloo Region team this morning. We're going to have a great time. I've got a lot of my colleagues coming on, and we're going to share some interesting stories over the last year. Again, my name is Greg Durocher. I'm President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and we're pleased that you've decided to join us. The Chamber's vision is to inspire, change, and lead in fostering greatness in our community and economic prosperity, make Cambridge the most envied city to live, work, and play and build a business in. So thank you very much. Today, also, we have a hashtag for you. If you're following along and you want to tweet something out, we'd appreciate it if you would use this hashtag CAMBCOC. That's hashtag CAMBCOC. You can see it on the screen in front of you. And thank you very much for doing that. And please share some of your comments. We'd all love to follow along with what you're getting out of our session this morning. At this time, I'd like to introduce some board members that are going to be joining us this morning. Darren Drouillard from Powerline Logistics Services. He is the chair of the board of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Mirzad Salkorde, he is with DB Noise Reduction, Inc. He is a director for the chamber. And Rena Hawkins from H4 Logistics. She is also a director with the chamber. And I'd like to also introduce some dignitaries that are spending their morning with us as well. We want to welcome the Township of Woolwich Mayor, Sandy Shantz, Regional Chair, Karen Redmond, Regional Councillors Helen Jowett, Jim Erb, and Carl Kiefer, and of course, City of Waterloo Councillors, Diane Freeman and Sandra Hanner. And our sponsors, of course, we can't do without them. We all know that. Our Breakfast Club sponsors are TD and Graham Matthew. And at this point, I would like to introduce Eric Bergeron from TD to bring greetings on behalf of the sponsors. Eric.
Great. Thank you, Greg. As Greg mentioned, my name is Eric Bergeron. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a relationship manager with TD Commercial Bank covering Cambridge. Our local office also covers the Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, and Stratford regions. We're excited to continue sponsoring this great breakfast series with our good friends over at Graham Matthew. I'm hoping everybody on the call was able to enjoy some of this beautiful weather that we've had over the weekend, and most importantly, that you, your family, and your friends are keeping safe in these trying times. So with that, I'm sure you're all looking forward to this great lineup of speakers that the Chamber has again arranged for us today. So I'm going to pass it back to Greg to take over.
Thank you very much, Eric, and we certainly appreciate the efforts of TD and Graham Matthew. Of course, I'd also like to shout out to a couple of other sponsors that are supporting this morning as well, and that's Energy Plus Inc., H4 Logistics Inc., HeartZap Safety Training and Equipment, and the JD Development Group. Of course, all strong supporters of our chamber programs, and we certainly appreciate their effort as well. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues and my friends over the last, many years, but we've certainly come to be a lot closer together, I can tell you, in the last year. First of all, I want to introduce Tony LaMantia from the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation. He is the CEO, of course, and Avvey Peters, who is a Chief Strategy Officer from Communitech. Minto Schneider, who is good friend with and CEO of Explore Waterloo Region. And Matt Bondy, he is the Vice President of External Relations with Communitech. And of course, what would a day on a Chamber Network program like this be without my friend from the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber, Iain McLean. Welcome, folks. Isn't it fun to be all together like this and talking to people, and you really don't know who's out there, but everybody's listening. You got to pay attention to that, especially you, Mr. McLean. Please pay attention to that.
Paying attention. I was first on here. No, I wasn't.
Well, some of us have been meeting, I think in the very beginning, practically daily, others occasionally. And let me tell you something, who we haven't had on the Best Waterloo team meetings weekly, but only because she has been extremely busy with a program that, as been incredibly successful, and that's Digital Main Street. And Avvey Peters from Communitech led that charge. So tell us about the positive experiences you've heard about, Avvey, over the course of the last year since coming up with Digital Main Street. I think it kind of wound down and then it picked back up again. And you know, because of government funding that was extended. And what were some of the bigger challenges going forward as you developed that program and as it rolled out?
Great, thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. The Digital Main Street project really has been an exercise in partnership right across the province. So we, as Communitech, we and our partners, both locally and across Southwestern Ontario, we've been trying to make sure we're reaching as many restaurant owners, small retailers, small services businesses, those true Main Street bricks and mortar businesses that struggled so much with the early part of the pandemic and with subsequent challenges because of the inability for them to open their physical spaces and do business the way that they normally would like to. The project came together in a matter of about 5 weeks. It builds on a really successful platform, the Digital Main Street platform, that has been around for a few years, largely led by the Toronto area BIA group. And what we were able to do was to add a technology dimension to it, by putting together teams of digital marketing and digital sales professionals, giving them a small army of co-op students and new grads to help one-on-one engagements with small businesses. And so far in Waterloo Region, we've been able to help 537 small businesses. Right across Southwestern Ontario, those numbers grow of just under 5,000 businesses, thanks to the good work of all of our partners. And the kinds of work that we call them transformation teams. These digital transformation teams are usually a team of 5 or 6 co-op students and young professionals led by an experienced digital marketer, digital sales professional. And they work with the business owner to say, okay, if you've already got, digital presence, you've got, your website is set up and you started to engage in e-commerce and e-retail in that way, what's going to help you reach a new audience, take it to the next level? Can we help you with a digital marketing campaign? Can we help you optimize your customer fulfillment? Those are the kinds of projects that we've been working on. So it's been quite a wild ride, I will say. Lots of work in a short period of time, but we really think we've helped make a difference for those small business owners.
Well, I know Iain and I would probably both join in knowing that a number of our members organizations have taken the opportunity up, and it's in fact, some of the comments that we get back all the time are, it was transformational for them, but in the spirit of what's going on, it was a game changer for them. It enabled them where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to transform and do something that they probably never thought they were going to have to do. Who was going to have to rely on curbside pickup and online ordering? Small businesses just say, well, I got my customer base. They come in and see me once a week or twice a month. And, and that's how I serve them. And that's how I build my business. But boy, oh boy, when all of a sudden you're shut down, you can't have that interaction anymore, that direct face-to-face contact with your customers. Something has to change. And I think, from your perspective, you must get a ton of emails in from some participants that say, thank you very much. This has been a game changer for us and enabled us to kind of stretch ourselves through the pandemic.
We really do. The feedback, particularly about those student teams, has been extraordinary. So business owners have really seen a way to help them add a new level of service, not only to get them through what's been an extraordinarily difficult time, but putting in place some of their own tools and infrastructure and techniques that they're going to be able to carry forward as well. So we get wonderful response from the businesses and from the students and the young grads as well. For many of them, it was extraordinarily difficult to get a co-op job through the course of the pandemic. and we've been able to help them. We've got relationships with all of the post-secondary institutions locally, but also right across Southwestern Ontario. And so the feedback from those young professionals as well has been wonderful, because they feel like they're really contributing. They're really making a difference in the communities in which they live.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tony, I remember back, actually it was March 23rd, 2020. I got an outline from you. I think all of us got an outline from you on building a cooperative group that would, meet whenever we needed to meet and talk about strategies around how do we help our local economy and our small businesses and medium-sized businesses navigate through this, because at that point none of us really knew how long this was going to be, and I can remember having those early conversations on how this should be structured and what should we be doing, and really was almost I don't want to say it was a blind leading the blind, but in essence it was, because we had no idea. The first lockdown was what, 14 days or something like that. Then it extended to 28. And then, we almost couldn't see the end of the tunnel at that point. And as it ended up, here we are a year later and we're still facing the same things. What do you think was the impact of our voice on governments and even for that matter, local small businesses over the course of the last year?
What was the impact? I'm going to start off by saying, you look back and you sort of scratch your head and say, what were we thinking, in standing this up? But what we were thinking was that we needed a collective voice. And a number of us then started to talk about, well, how would it work? And then who? And I just remember some early chicken scratch kind of written on the kitchen table, thinking about a way where a group of us could come together and be in between firms, those who are obviously being impacted directly, and then decision makers, whether it's municipal, provincial, and federal elected officials. And so the idea would be for us to provide advice and advocacy up based on the filter and the advice we could provide, from the input we got from firms, and then the decision updates going back down. And we all created, as organizations, COVID resource pages. But, we very much approach this in a learn by doing mindset. Like we pivoted a number of times. We set up these 9 subcommittees. There was like 90 people who were working together to speak on behalf of, whether it was, small business, whether it was the tourism sector, just a range of different businesses. And we didn't know where this was going. Like, I was just looking back at some of the materials. We launched it on, March 27th. We wrote a memo in June of last year that basically said, okay, we're not going to focus on the recovery, right? So, but about a year ago, we told all the members, yep, this was a letter to Waterloo Region elected officials and CAOs, and the 5 industry subgroups are going to kind of meet less, because some of us really wanted to get back to our core business, but the reality was, it was still very far away. There wasn't the second wave yet. There wasn't an indication of the challenges. But in terms of the impact, this really came to life for me, and I think for everyone else in this group, when you would hear the individual stories of companies helped by the wage subsidy or by the kind of rent support, the cash flow supports, the resource pages that we had. We each have many of those stories. I remember most recently dealing with a hair salon owner in Cambridge who had to wait literally 3 months for her small business support grant. And the only issue was that she shared a unit with another business that was excluded. And she, it was as simple as having to demonstrate that she had her own business within that shared unit. And then certainly the money started to flow, and then you get these emails. So look, I think we should all be proud of diving in head first. It was a leap of faith. We should be proud of our patience because we were, a lot was required at the front end of this. And I'd say now more than ever do we need to continue to be patient. But we had a meaningful impact on social and economic life during the pandemic in the region. And, I don't think we quite, we're not far enough. There isn't enough distance of time to assess kind of how important this is, but it just feels like it was the right thing to do. And, none of us had a particular horse in this race. We just needed a collective voice, and it was just great that we were able to do this. And, I was getting really sick and tired of being the COVID co-host, like 6 weeks in a row on Business to Business. And that was like, part of it was, all right, guys, let's do something a little more productive. So I'll just leave it there. I think it's been great.
Yeah.
Those were the 6 best rated shows we had ever on the show, by the way, Tony, just saying, just putting it out there.
But Tony, while we were all involved, numerous times a week in the very beginning, we did extend it to twice a week. We still meet twice a week to talk about, issues that we can move forward. But there were a ton of other people behind this. It wasn't just those of us here. Maybe talk a little bit about the committees and how important they were at filtering up information.
They were critically important because they mobilized very quickly. They were organized. So they included tourism and culture, small business, the not-for-profit sector, which, was hit very hard, tech, manufacturing, agriculture. There was a GR committee. And, one of the challenges was we told each of the members, and when we were all at it, there was about 90 of us working away. We told each of them to not change, make sure that we didn't confuse the client account management relationships in the community. We didn't want to start changing who small businesses would report through the BIAs. We didn't want to impact the chambers or Communitech. We said, no, don't change those relationships. This is really about, advocacy and decision-making and real-time intelligence going up during this pandemic to municipal, federal, and provincial governments, right? But lots of people involved. My entire organization of 14 people and a couple of co-ops got involved in developing co-op resource pages, COVID resource pages. We did a couple of webinars early on how to access CERB, how to deal with the rent subsidy, kind of essentially as we were going. The workforce committee was really, really important, kind of laying out some real impacts and helping with job fairs. And so just I'd say across the board, we have these all hands meetings about once a month, and they were valuable, especially early on. I don't know if folks remember the disconnect between kind of, those that were on the right side or the lucky side of the digital divide. We were hearing some real pain from, and I remember those early all hands calls where, as a leader, you say to yourself, wow, we're really missing what's happening on Main Street. Let's focus on that because there's a lot of pain out there. So it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have this all hands approach. And, it wasn't all roses and sunshine for sure. But it was half the battle was just showing up and listening and being organized, and the construct seems to have worked.
Yeah, and I think that's what, people need to understand is this took the horsepower of a ton of people in the region of Waterloo, all committed and dedicated to, our local economy and our local businesses and our local employers and the employees of those local employers. It takes a lot of people to do some good things, and I think that strengthened the voice of Best Waterloo Region going to provincial and federal governments and saying, we're really speaking on behalf of the entire economy in the region of Waterloo. And I think it was, wisely thought of by, I don't know whether it was you, I'm going to give you credit for it, but last March to come up with this plan and go forward. Minto, you're CEO of probably the hardest hit sector in anywhere in the world with respects to COVID-19. You can't gather anywhere, so you can't go to African Lion Safari and Bingamans, and you can't have events and programs, and so largely your last March, your membership or the industries that you represent were completely shut down, like just totally locked up tight. But it was only for 14 days. And then it was only for another 14 days. And there was kind of optimism. Like we all had optimism, right? Oh, well, we're going to go through this, in another month, we'll be okay. I don't know what was going through our minds at the time thinking we were going to be okay. We had a global pandemic. We had a virus that was spreading virtually uncontrollably. But I think, would you have believed, or would a lot of your members have believed, that we'd be sitting here a year later in virtually exactly the same position?
Absolutely not. You're right, Greg. When it first started, we thought a couple of weeks, it's going to be over. I thought, Tony and I share offices. I thought, yeah, we'll be out of the office. We'll move out March the 16th, 17th, and we'll be back. I was going back weeks later to pick up plants, things that were not looking that healthy, getting stuff that I thought I was going to need. And we're still not back in the office. So, and for our industry, it's been devastating. Initially, the close of restaurants and bars was what was most affected because, as you mentioned, African Lion Safari wasn't open yet, so they weren't affected. Binghamton's Water Park, which is a huge attraction for our region, still hasn't opened. And I know that Mark is hoping in the roadmap that we have to recovery now that the province released last week, that he is seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. But for events like sporting events, Waterloo Region is a big host. Cambridge hosts a lot of hockey tournaments and soccer. And we haven't had the provincial volleyball championships because people haven't been able to gather. That affects a lot of businesses, not just hotels, but restaurants and bars across the region. Meetings and conferences haven't been able to take place at any of our hotels or Binghamton's or any other facility that hosts meetings. And we're not sure when that's going to come back. It's not only places being safe, because I think we all know that our operators have been doing everything they can to pass the Safe Check or Safe Travels program, become certified in whichever way they can, but people are still reluctant to do that, to gather in larger groups. So I think for us, and prior to joining the leadership group, I was sitting on the small business committee, the tourism and culture committee, and the workforce committee. And it was really amazing how all of those groups had a lot of the same issues. And thanks to Communitech and Digital Main Street, and working with the BIAs and the chambers, we were able to get a lot of information about going digital out to our smaller restaurants. A lot of the larger restaurants already had that kind of availability or digital knowledge that they had implemented in their businesses, but many of the small ones really didn't. And the Small Business Resource Center was tremendously helpful. So we had to concentrate on working with our local businesses to help them survive so that they're going to be able to operate or continue to operate once things do open up. One of the things that I think many of them found during the lockdown, or not even a lockdown, when we were allowed to kind of travel around in our own region. Number one, they discovered their own region, which is maybe a silver lining to this whole thing. People learned a lot about the community that they live in, but they also found that much of their business comes from outside the region. Some of the restaurants I don't think realized how much they depended on people coming from outside the region, even if it's just for the day, to go to St. Jacob's Farmers Market, maybe African Lion Safari, the Cambridge Market, whatever it is that they came in for, they were spreading their business around to other businesses. And when only the people that live in Waterloo Region were allowed to order from their own, from their neighbors, it really created a big gap. And we're not through it yet, and I'm not sure that we're going to see everybody survive.
Yeah, I've often said, and tourism and hospitality, is really one of those industries that I think everybody knows. But I've always said, when you look at a country, for example, that's why trade is so important, because a country actually produces more than it can consume itself. So it needs to have the ability to be able to move its product and service and attract people to come in and buy its product and service, because we just make more things than we actually need. Hospitality is everybody knows that, right? Like Binghamton's can't operate. African Lion Safari can't operate if they don't have American visitors coming in from Buffalo to go through so when all of that shuts down, really, you kind of look at it and say, well, a catastrophe has happened. Like we're in serious catastrophic mode here. How how have the operators been through this? I know they're frustrated with some of the government support programs and things like that we've been trying to help navigate through that. But how has their mood been about their ability to maintain?
I think surprisingly upbeat for many of them. A lot of them have worked at different things. Like Binghamton's had the drive-through, the drive-in. I mean, just trying to figure out a way to stay alive. And many of them have gone virtual. Like the museum for example, had virtual visits to the museum. A lot of the restaurants, or sorry, not restaurants, galleries and museums have provided kind of a virtual experience. But and they're thankful. I mean, they're frustrated with some of the programs, and we've talked about this at the leadership table, some of the things that haven't worked, but they're also very thankful that the province and the feds stepped up to the plate as quickly as they did to get money out. It hasn't been without bumps in the road, but I think with the chambers, with the leadership group, with Communitech, with ourselves, trying to get as much information out to our partners as possible, and to try and maybe translate some of the programs so that they're easier to understand has been really helpful. I mean, there has been all sorts of, Tony mentioned the webinars. You guys at the chambers have been doing webinars. We've been reposting them, you know, giving kind of instruction of how people should work at getting through. But because it's been going on for so long, I think this last shutdown has been one of the worst ones. Yeah. Because for restaurant employees being let go, then rehired, then let go, then rehired, and let go again, it's been tremendously challenging from a mental and physical health perspective for a lot of families.
Yeah, it is. Matt Bondy, who has largely been our editor-in-chief on all of our diatribe. I actually don't know how he mustered his way through to some of the letters that he wrote to provincial and federal authorities, because I can tell you the verbiage changed dramatically when Matt Bondy would. But Matt has a ton of experience. For those of you watching, those of us know who are on, but you might not know that he's a former deputy chief of staff for Doug Ford. And has a tremendous amount of experience in government. And more importantly, I think the tone of information coming from outside of government into government and what it needs to look like, feel like, and sound like. And I think that's where our benefit has been. Matt, you know, we're certainly thankful for your efforts, and we're certainly thankful for your boss, Iain Klugman, from CEO of Communitech, for loaning you to us for the last year or so. From your perspective, how have you seen, barring some of the hiccups, and recognizing that no other government for over 100 years has had to go through this, how do you think governments largely, both federally and provincially, have responded to us in particular?
Yeah, sure, Greg. Happy to kind of dig into that a little bit. Thank you for having me on as well as the others. Just a real quick point of order, Greg. Before we went live this morning, you said, Matt, just take a look at whatever Iain McLean does and do the opposite. But he hasn't gone yet, so I'm not sure how to calibrate. I'll just try to make it up a bit as I go. And I guess, you know, just one other quick point of order. You mentioned my boss, Iain Klugman, and we're actually at Communitech in the middle of a leadership transition. So Iain Klugman, after a reign, if I can say that, just following Victoria Day, of about 17 years, a remarkable, successful tenure. He is now moving on to his next project, which is to, in the short term, support our new CEO, Chris Albinson, who has joined Communitech on May 17 from Silicon Valley. He's been Canada's champion in Silicon Valley for the last 20 years, and he's coming home to execute on a philosophy that he refers to as owning the podium. He wants Canadian firms to scale and win globally, and so do we all at Communitech and across the region. So excited to dig into that with him as well. You know, Greg, to your point around how we've been received and how governments have handled the crisis. I mean, this has been one of those situations where, as you alluded to, there's no playbook, right? There's simply no playbook for handling a, if I can say, kind of a black swan scenario like this at a global level when the world's economy and migration are so deeply intertwined. It's a wicked problem that has no single solution. And we're all just kind of iteratively getting there on accommodating the problem, attacking the problem, evolving our policies to address the problem, to keep our population safe. So, you know, governments across Confederation and at the federal level are all doing their very best. There are no greater patriots, I think, in this whole last year and a half of pandemic than healthcare workers and civil servants. Excuse me. They're all working around the clock to keep us safe, and that's been their life's mission for the last year and a half. So we all owe them a great debt of gratitude, both on the civil servant side and the healthcare side. I think that, you know, to the extent we've had success, Greg, working as a team collaboratively at BESTWR Waterloo Region, I think a lot of it has had to do with the kind of philosophy that we've taken to working both with and for firms and with governments. And I think that, you know, when it comes to having a relationship with governments and trying to solve problems in civil society, you have to pick a lane in terms of how you're going to approach your government relations. You know, one lane is transaction based. You just kind of watch governments do something. When you don't like it, you yell a little bit and you move on. And then there's a relationship-based approach. And as you know, I believe, and I think we all believe deeply in a relationship-based approach where, you know, not to demystify it too much, because, you know, some of us get paid to do government relations. I want to maintain some sense of secrecy here, but, you know, a lot of it has to do with just remembering that people are people, whether they're in government or in the private sector. And so, you know, how would I work with a business partner who's going through a very traumatic experience trying to deliver on a crazy range of deliverables like the government has been? Well, you do things like check in to see how they're doing. The kind of the ministries or the civil servants you work with, how are they doing? What are their priorities? What are they struggling with that you can maybe help with? Maintaining a no surprises approach. So whenever we issued letters, you know, maybe hoping for certain policies to develop, we never issued those by surprise, as we all know. We warmed all this up through our relationships that we have at Queen's Park and with the federal government and with our municipal partners, many of whom are with us this morning. And, you know, no surprises, try to help solve problems, praise publicly, criticize when you need to, but more importantly, show up with solutions. So, you know, I think we've just tried to use that philosophy as best we can. And I think based on the feedback, it's been, you know, a little bit helpful for the businesses in the region. So really, really pleased to have been a small part of that.
Yeah, well, and you know, you say a small part of it. I think you know, we will all say you've been a big part of it. You know, there's no question about it. Reining in sometimes some of the anxieties that we have at hearing from our small members and not understanding like what the heck is the government thinking. And you know, I think what I take from it, certainly from a personal perspective, Matt, is having you there who were really playing a very senior role in the government and understanding the volumes of information that's coming into that particular individual and their ability to be able to decipher what's right and what's wrong and how to make changes. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is the volume of letters and comments that are coming in from individuals or organizations just like ours and telling the government, no, you should be doing this, no, you should be doing that. How do they weigh that out? How, if you were there during this period of time, and thankfully Iain Klugman stole you away from that ridiculous position you had as Deputy Chief of Staff, but how do you weigh that? Like you must be feeling really thankful that you weren't there during this period of time, but how do you even weigh that out?
Well, you know what? I have found, you know, to say that, you know, I'm glad I'm not there now. I guess that's true to a degree, but I'd also, in a way, kill to be there because I think that some of the most important work in Canada is being done in the halls of Queen's Park and the other legislatures across our country. And, you know, I got a lot of friends on all sides of the aisle who are working their buns off for all of us. So, you know, there's always going to be a part of me that wants to be with them, especially when times are tough. I think, Greg, to answer your question on how, you know, a government goes about processing the volume of information and advocacy, I think they, you know, you get to a place where you are trying to distinguish signal from noise, right? And a lot of business, a lot of leadership is about, deciphering signal from noise. And I think one of the best ways to convey to government that what you provide is signal, whereas a lot of others may provide noise, is just having that philosophy of relationship and knowing when they see your name pop up on their phone, how do you want them to feel? I want them to feel like Matt's calling for a good reason, and he's probably got something he'd like to help us with. And so that's how I and so many government relations practitioners, including everybody on this call, just handles their business. And I think you earn that trust over time.
Yeah, you don't want to be that call that comes over the phone and you say, I'm just going to let that go to voicemail. Iain, you and I have worked together for a number of years now. We've had our radio show. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary of doing our radio show together. We have worked on programming together between our two chambers of commerce and sharing opportunities for our members together. But I think you would probably conclude exactly the same as I would conclude. There's never been a more important project for us to work together on than with our colleagues that are here in giving the incredible support that we've been able to give to small and medium-sized businesses across the region.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to read the question you actually wrote on Friday, but I'll just leave that for now. The rest of the people on here, and I would say it's been 10 and a half years we've been working together, Greg, and it only feels like forever. So let that sink in. No, it is. This has been, and Tony deserves the leadership or the credit for pulling this together. The precursor to this, and not to go too far into the weeds, was the Prosperity Council, which is all the organizations here. We've added Explore Waterloo for obvious reasons, but this is I would say a far more practical and useful iteration of the Prosperity Council, because it's the four organizations saying we all have something in common right now that requires us to work together. So I think it demonstrates, and Matt eloquently talked about how we are seen. And I think that the letters and the advocacy we've doing publicly and privately demonstrates that our collective, that when we work together and say, here's something that matters to business and the municipalities, we've been doing, advocating for our municipalities, saying, here's what we need in the community to have a strong community so we can, help business. That we're seen as being a productive force and one of those things that we all have them, we kind of go, I'm not going to take that phone call. Or as Matt says, I'm going to get back to Iain or Greg or Tony, and we all have those relationships. So that's really come into focus for me. And I think, part of, this exercise is we all hear every day, Minto and, Avvey working with Digital Main Street what's been incredible to see is the pivoting, and Tony and a lot of the companies here in Waterloo Region that, when we had no PPE and Communitech was gathering stuff from people's, garages, that the 5 masks that they had, Tony's working with businesses who, Clips Automation is a classic example, never made masks before. Suddenly they're making medical grade masks, right? So the pivoting that's gone on in our community, the innovation, the resiliency has been incredible. And I think the seismic shift that's happened of how we work, where we work, and the importance of digital is going to be one of the lasting things that I think this group will always have to keep at top of mind, because this is not an elastic band that's going to go back. There's going to be some fundamental changes which have already happened. And I think this group is going to be really important, because individually we can still have our say. I think the collective of us working together, even though that requires me to spend more time than I want to with Greg Durocher, it's important, and I do it as a good Christian boy. I'm called. This is a call to service, and it's one of the crosses that I have to bear, which is you, Gregory.
Yeah. We for those folks who take that little hint of religion there, we had 2 Protestants, Iain and I, and we had 2 Catholics regularly attending, Tony and Matt. And so there was some really interesting religious dialogue going on at most times, and mostly coming from Mr. McLean, actually, which was interesting.
You're the one that, Greg, you usually give the sermon, but I would say I want to comment on the just quickly on the meetings themselves, right? So there's always important work to do, and I think it's been collegial, it's been fun in a lot of ways, it's been interesting, it's useful, it's been frustrating as we think about the things that need to change or that we want to or the things that are maddening and annoying and frustrating with decisions and how things are coming out. But for me it's been like been a little bit like it's almost a therapy session, so we support each other in what what are some difficult days. It can be, and this is mostly you, Greg, the hour of rage sometimes, a couple of times a week where we do our venting. But it's also, and of course, we have Caitlin and now Minto to provide daycare for the children when we get off the rails. But I found it useful just on a personal level because we all have a lot of things, and it's been for me, it's been a source of to feel supported in the individual work we do is that we've supported each other through this, which has been really useful.
Yeah. Matt.
I was just, as I'm listening to Iain, I was just kind of reflecting a little bit on the experience that the whole community's had over the last year and a half. And like, it's been, obviously so hard for everyone, especially some of the hardest hit sectors that Minto takes care of. And, just one thing that's really come to mind for me as I work in Waterloo Region, but try to pay attention to what's happening elsewhere, is that I think, to our credit, when times get really tricky, Waterloo Region starts on second base because we can rely on a deep kind of culture of collaboration here that I think folks from the outside find it really interesting and unique when they become part of Waterloo Region or work with us. But the culture of collaboration and partnership and teamwork and barn building, you really saw it come through in the pandemic. And, we talked about Digital Main Street. I mean, Avvey moved heaven and earth to pull that thing together. And she did it, because she has so many great partners across the region. Look at chambercheck.ca and staysafescreen.ca, where the chambers and Communitech, in partnership with the federal government, the provincial government, the municipality has been great. Chair Redmond's team has been great. We start on second base because we instinctively work together here. And I just think that is such a great asset to Iain's point that we can keep iterating on going forward. We can never lose that.
What a great analogy. Avvey.
I want to build on what Matt just shared, because I think one of the things that perhaps we don't realize as a community is how much further our impact has gone. So one of the things that I've been able to do, thanks to the good work of the economic success team, was to be able to share with my network of innovation centers across the country. Here are the kinds of things that we are saying to our clients, to our provincial government, sharing with our municipal leaders. Here are things as practical as, here are the ways that we are now changing facilities and collecting PPE for those businesses in our community. Those are things that have been shared broadly across the country, and the feedback that I get has been much gratitude for the work that's been done.
Yeah, Tony.
I just wanted to extend that a bit. The construct that we built with the business and economic support team of Waterloo Region was actually shared by Conway globally in April of last year. So it was only a month off the ground. We set it up, and it was essentially in a webinar shared with the entire world, about 600 guests from around the world on kind of what your community could do to deal with the pandemic, right? So, and the one thing that I think we lose sight of is the importance of planning, and our regional government actually had a pandemic control. They had a plan, right? That they dusted off. Now, was it perfect? No, but they actually had a pandemic control plan, and so all of this seems to have come together. Some communities are more ready than others. It hasn't been perfect, but man, were we ready? We were ready,
Minto, speaking of that, and that's a great segue, Tony, because going through my mind, I wanted to go to Minto and say, are we going to be ready for the next time?
I think so. I mean, I think what Avvey and Tony and everybody else is really saying is that our businesses have been very, not only working together, but also adapting very, very quickly to the new reality. I mean, they realized very quickly that they had to make changes if they were going to survive. I don't ever want to see this happen again. And hopefully with what we've learned so far, we might be able to prevent another outbreak because our businesses know how to operate safely. And I think that's maybe something that the province hasn't given businesses credit for. You know, they seem to be extending restrictions when our businesses know very well what to do. And they are the ones that are taking care, and they're the ones that can manage events. And I'm thinking of larger centers like Binghamton's, for example, where at an event or at a water park, they have the staff, professional staff available to make sure people are keeping socially distanced. When people go to a park, there is no control. Anybody can go to the park. They can be as crowded as they want. So, you know, I think when we've got facilities like, and I was thinking about the Hamilton Family Theatre in Cambridge, you know, they've been completely shut down. Drayton hasn't been able to operate anywhere, but we know that they can operate and they can operate safely. So I think that we're prepared. I think that there may be some bumps, but we've learned a lot over the last year that we can reuse and hopefully not face the same kind of restrictions that we're trying to make it through now.
Iain.
Yeah, I think just building on that, I think one of the things that this group at the core, and Tony used this a lot, is say, or you know, those that have skin in the game, we got to listen to, and so that's where we take a lot of the. What are the, you know, in hospitality, those particularly those are really hard hit, you know, listening to them and taking that and feeding it into and trying to get that message in. I think, Greg, I think it was you or Tony, but one of the two of you talked about the precautionary principle, right? That was in the SARS report of saying, and it's we always said it's belt and suspenders time. We've got to try stuff. We've got to, you know, all of the things we can do to you know, stay open, be safe, keep the community safe. But following that precautionary principle of saying, if we see things that have worked, we've got to do those things. And that's what sort of leads to where we are right now in the course of this. And I think there's, you know, 4 or 5 things that we keep hammering on, which is, you know, we got to up our masking game until the vaccinations are all done. Rapid screening and contact tracing are going to be tools of the trade for any business that you got to be doing those things. The digital part feeds into that. Like, how do we have, you know, have more ability to work differently? Ventilation is a very practical part, but we know now this is airborne, and that even with vaccinations, schools and other places where you're in congregate settings have to have state-of-the-art ventilation to make sure that this airborne is. And then finally, we know that if there is a silver bullet in the short and medium term, it's vaccination. And so lots of our businesses are saying, what can I force? You know, can I force people to do it? What about my guests? It's a very complicated question, but ultimately, if we don't get people vaccinated, we will not be fully open. And so I get those are the sorts of things that I think our group has been working on. And I would echo just lastly what Avvey talked about and the work that she's done and how it's filtered through, because I hear about it from other chamber executives, as you do, Greg, of digital Main Street getting out into the country. And it started right here, like with the Toronto Board of Trade and the work that you did there. But our rapid screening, and you know, Iain Klugman got us connected along with Francis McRae from Industry Canada, connected me, and Iain was doing some work of how do we get rapid screening into the workplace? Like, how do we take advantage of that? And I'm going to preface this by saying I never do this, but I'm going to give credit to Gregory, because we were doing some work on this and saying, geez, you know, we were going to do a clinic, and then we were going to do the rapid or the mobile buses. And we still said, you know, we got to get more of these out. And it was actually your brain wave about a week before Easter where you said, why don't we just give these out directly if we can get them directly to business? And that change that the province made, which was so incredibly important, to say that you could administer the tests, like self-administer, and as you and I discovered, Greg, in the Dumb and Dumber show, when we launched this thing, is a well-trained basset hound could do these screening kits, but it was so powerful that what we started about 7 weeks ago is now in 80 chambers across the province. It's going to be rolling out in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC in the coming months or coming weeks. And that all happened here, and it wasn't us. We took something, a little bit from Communitech and Iain, a little bit from Health Canada, you know, put it together, and thank God we had Allison and Lisa who really run the program. But it's mushroomed, and I think we've got over 2,000 businesses. We've given away 150 or 160,000 kits in the region of Waterloo. Clips Automation with their mask donation, 150 medical grade masks. That's all the cooperation and collaboration, and I'm not sure what have happened if we didn't have this group and then said, well, we can't do it, or who else do we need to make it happen? And I think that's kind of some of that, the power of this collective.
Yeah. Minto.
Yeah, Greg, I was going to say something about the screening because we hadn't talked about it yet, but I think one of the most important things about the screening, number one, is that Waterloo Region piloted it, but number two is that it gives people the confidence to either go back to work where their workplace is doing the screening for everyone that's coming to work, or for the customer that's coming in as a customer, knowing that everyone that's working there has tested negative from the screening. And until everyone's got their second vaccination, which could be September, depending on how things roll out, we still need to rely on the screening to keep people safe. And I think keeping that up and getting more and more businesses involved is a way to do that.
Yeah, Tony, you know, Iain talked about it a little bit. You kind of, actually it was Iain, for your recollection, you might want to write this down because you've said it a couple of times. I don't know whether it was you or Tony. It was actually Tony that brought the precautionary principle to. He actually went into the archives of somewhere and dug out the SARS Commission report and pulled out, I think the most important piece or element of that report, which was, you know, governments need to understand they need to lead with the precautionary principle as opposed to waiting for scientific certainty on every single thing. Obviously, we need scientific certainty when it comes to vaccines, but all of these other things that have probably frustrated us most in our meetings is the fact that, you know, we need to be looking at ideas that are going to make a difference. Tony, these ideas aren't going to go away. These are going to, you know, I've talked to many people who have said, I'm going to continue to wear a mask after this because it's the first winter I've gone through without a cold or the flu. The evidence is all over the place that the precautionary principle should lead, and it was you that brought it to our team, and I think we're making headway at getting that clear understanding at government that the precautionary principle is important to look at.
Yeah, you know, that 2007 report, so I read the executive summary 3 times because it is just replete with really good advice. And you know, the late Archie Campbell, who's a brilliant Ontario Superior Court judge, didn't want it to be collecting dust on a shelf. I mean, even the fact that we have independent chief medical officers of health in 34 regions, I mean, that, you know, that independence, that advice, that was one of the recommendations that the government followed, right? And so, you know, and one thing I'll say is that, you know, people do refer to this, you know, COVID pandemic as a black swan, but technically, the author of the book Black Swan would tell anyone who's read it that this is not a black swan, that these types of things happen, they're predictable, even though they happen once in 100 years, and you better be ready, right, when they happen. And you know, I think we just have to, we're fighting human nature here, right? Because we all kind of go back to the things that we know that we shouldn't be doing as soon as we think we're in the clear. And I would say that we're starting to feel better now. We're starting to think about, you know, congregating again with family and friends at some point later this summer. And some of us are optimistically like taking leaps of faith, like deciding to cut their own hair. I've done it twice already. So, I mean, that's a big deal. But I can't wait to start to ease back into a more familiar, normal pattern that is full of human contact and kind of celebration of life and friendship and all those wonderful things. And I would just say that, you know, we're going to have some hard lessons here that we just need to remind ourselves of from time to time. And you know, it's going to be something that leaves a mark on us. So we don't see it yet, but, you know, God willing, in 10 or 20 or 30 years, we'll see how much this has changed all of us.
Mhm.
Right?
I'm not sure if the hair shot was at me, but probably was. So what I'm going to do just for you, Tony, is I'm going to leave it go, just so there's a reminder always for you to reflect back to this last year. Avvey, what have you learned out of this entire experience?
I think what I learned was that I underestimated how quickly a group of committed people can move and build something and get it executed. And even when it's not perfect, but the bias to action, I mean, we know that we have this in Waterloo Region, and I know each of our organizations certainly has this. But when I reflect on last spring in particular, I am still blown away by how quickly we were able to mobilize some really important work.
It's kind of, I guess it's when, you know, you're on the edge of the cliff and somebody's coming up behind you to push you. You're always looking for that vine you can grab on the way down, you know, and I think I get that feeling that that's kind of where we were. We were falling over that cliff, and we were the lucky ones that grabbed the vine and held everybody with us. Minto, what did you learn?
I think one of the things that's really important, and I wanted to mention it, is that we were able to line up what we wanted with sector associations from across Canada and across Ontario. So whether it was the CFIB or the Ontario Chamber of Commerce or the Tourism Industry Association, you know, it helped to have our collective knowledge to take it to those groups and say, hey, let's align what we're asking for from the province and from the feds so that we are more apt to have them listen to us. And to Matt's point about trying to make sure that we're sharing from a point of being we're on the same side as you are. We're just trying to tell you, this is what industry is saying, this is what's going on out there. And if we can line up with those organizations who represent much more than just Waterloo Region, we can see success.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what did you learn?
Those are great reflections for everybody so far. I think there's a lot of PhDs that are going to get written as well. There's a lot to study, right? It's been about 2 decades jammed into a year and a half. One of the things that I have been really seized of is the importance of public communication, especially political public communication. And so I think, you know, all governments across Confederation and federally have certainly done their level best. And it matters so much to the tenor in our communities when it appears that government gets it and when it appears that government might be missing it. It matters so much to morale. And I think that it's really significant to reflect back on this. I remember earlier in the pandemic when people really discovered the Doug Ford that I know, a caring and compassionate, you know, person who really truly is there because he's got a heart of gold. And I also see as the pandemic has gone on, where governments, you know, including here in Ontario, maybe have been a little bit off on this or that policy, how that impacts how the community feels and people's perception of what their life is going to be like over the next number of months. So public and political communication, I think, has been really interesting throughout this.
Iain, what have you learned?
Well, I think that I would echo the communication front. I think when this falls through municipally, provincially, and federally. When they get it right, it makes a big difference. When they get it wrong, it makes a big difference. And so it is absolutely essential. And sometimes in the normal times, you'd say, why are they on message track? There's a reason you're on message track, so that you got one message, right? And that people understand it. And I think where Minto's talked about it, you know, we all hear it too, is there's frustration. When there's frustration, it's usually because there's no clear answer of what's coming or why something's in place. And I think that's really important. I think the other part is, and I think we all say this, But for those from outside the region, partnerships are absolutely essential, right? And so and there's a ton of them, and Tony's talked about them, the 90 groups that were part of the Best Waterloo construct. But think about all the people that we deal with day in and day out. The universities, the college, the the healthcare, the hospitals, the presidents of the hospitals, and everyone. If you go down the list, and our group was in constant contact, what do you need? Like what we knew the municipalities were going to be hard hit because your transit's running because you got to have it running, and there's no one on them. So like those partnerships made a big difference for the community, but also the health of the community is so important to business. And then the last thing I would just say, and I'll give credit to Tony here. I'm not going to share it. I'll just say it's him, even if it wasn't him. We learn or we just got to get at doing stuff, like do some stuff, learn and adapt. And that's easier for business to do in some ways than government, but we've really encouraged government is that try some stuff. You gotta give the tools so that business, to Minto's point, is everyone wants to do the right thing. Give us some tools, we'll execute on them. And that's what business is really good at. And so, whether it's digital Main Street, whether it's masks and screening, whether it's, working with industry associations of how you're going to reopen, whether it's, work that Tony's doing at the pandemic control, and all of this happening, that we're still a destination of choice for all the reasons we just talked about today. Is why wouldn't you want to be doing business here in Waterloo Region when you can, now we all discover we can do business anywhere, or many businesses can do it anywhere. Why choose here? This is part of that reason why you'd want to choose here.
Tony, what did you learn?
Wow. I learned that I'm not as tough as I think. You sort of trained over many decades to focus on results, but what I learned is that the how really matters, and that's what people remember. And so I think I did some growing up during this pandemic really quickly in terms of my own tone. I see you smiling there, Greg, but yeah, I'm known to have a bit of a temper and to be a little bit too results focused. But yeah, I think the how really matters, and it's come through during this challenge.
I think that was important. I'll tell you what I've learned. I've learned that that the best thing anybody can do is surround themselves with really, really, really smart people, especially when you got a problem. And I've been surrounded, thankfully, by you folks and our organization, because I certainly found out that through times of trials and tribulations, and whether it's the organization or whether it's in the community that you're supporting, you can't do it alone, that you need to have a support mechanism. You need to have the ability, Tony, to vent sometimes and to, get whatever's on your mind off your mind, and then to have some sane center people on the other side bring you back into balance and say, wait a minute, this is what we have to do. And I have to tell you that in spite of the fact that, the environment in the last year has not been anything anybody would want, I can tell you, you folks being around me, having the influence on me and allowing me to have some opportunity to share my opinions and my views has made it as best a year as it could possibly have been, given the pandemic. So I want to extend all of my thanks, certainly Avvey, for your work with Digital Main Street. It's just been absolutely wonderful. You've helped tons of our businesses here. Minto, your dedication and advocacy for hospitality and tourism organizations does not go unnoticed from them nor from us. Matt, your keen insight on what government is thinking and how we should approach things has been absolutely invaluable, and it's given me new hope and new understanding of what it is. Tony, your leadership of really being that kind of that arching view of all things economy, whether it be the biggest of big or the smallest of small, and your passion and commitment and dedication to our local economy has been absolutely inspiring to me. And then, of course, my buddy on the radio show, Iain McLean, I know that because we have a close personal bond, we would have been working together, but thankfully we had tons of smart people around us to help us as well and navigate us. But it's,
they call them safety rails there, Greg, around us there. So
everybody knows that if you've ever been bowling and you had the bumper rails on, that's what all of these folks have been for us. Make sure that none of our balls went into the gutter. And I think that was actually Matt's official title. He was the gutter rail person on Best Waterloo, just to make sure. But folks, thank you very much for joining us this morning and talking about it. Thank you very much for the past year. I know we'll be working together a little bit more, but thanks for all you did for the economy in the region of Waterloo.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon.
That's it, folks. Check out Chamber Chat every Wednesday morning from 9 to 10. Tomorrow morning, I got Dr. Rob Leone. He's going to talk about something that Matt talked about in this, about all the volumes of information coming into the decision makers and what kind of a difficult time they have at doing it. Go to cambridgechamber.com and register for your events. Go to all of our websites and look at Communitech, look at the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce for their events as well. We're all here to support you in our local economy. Thank you very much and have a great day.